Hello, nice to meet you.
오늘은 루이스 에런슨 저자님과 독자들의 직접적인 소통의 시간입니다. 그러면 이제 바로 질문을 들어가려고 합니다.
나이가 들면서 죽음에 대해 고민하고 미리 준비할 수 있는 것에 대해서 유언장을 작성하는 것만 생각을 했었는데 요즘에는 건강 상태를 가족들과 공유하는 것도 고민해야겠다고 생각하게 되었습니다. 가족 중 나이 드신 분들이 자신의 건강 상태에 대해서 이야기할 때 나이가 들었으니 아픈가 보다라고 단순한 노화로 생각하고 생활 습관을 개선하겠다는 의지가 없는 경우도 있는데 노화 또는 질병, 질환 증상을 어떻게 구분할 수 있을지 궁금합니다.
Good question. So the body obviously changes with age, but old age isn't a disease. The parts work a little less well as we get older, but they mostly still work. So when something really doesn't work, that may be a disease. So important to think, what's normal aging and what's disease and how can you compensate. Also, when you think about, sometimes people will say, oh, it's just old age. But I have in my book a joke about another knee, actually, where an old man goes in and he says, my knee hurts. And the doctor says, oh, well, you're old. And the old man says, but the other knee is old too, and it works just fine. So sometimes we're lazy and we blame old age for what's actually a disease process. So one of the reasons people say, oh, it's just old age is because the whole culture tends to say that. And some of it is. There's part truth to that. But it's also true that at any age, people can get stronger and function better. So one of the scientific studies that made me a geriatrician in the mid-1990s was an article that took old people in a nursing home, people in their 80s and 90s, but also in a nursing home. So not healthy people in their 80s and 90s, but old and frail. And they have them start to lift weights and eat more protein. And people who had used a walker could use a cane. And people who had used a cane could walk without a cane. And people who hadn't walked up steps could walk up steps. The difference wasn't in their bodies. The difference was that somebody believed they could get better. And yes, they didn't get as fast as a 20-year-old running down the street, but they got so they could be independent and feel good. And we can do that at all ages if people believe. And the people believing is both the old person, it's the old person, the family, and the people who might help, the doctor, the physical therapist, everyone else.
모든 사람은 공통적으로 마음의 준비가 된 상태에서 편안하고 자연스럽게 죽기를 희망하는 것은 일일이 물어보지 않아도 확실한 것 같습니다. 그러면 어떻게 죽음을 맞이할 수 있을까요? 책에서는 죽음을 잘 맞이하기 위해 필요한 것은 의사 박사 학위도 빨리 끝내고자 하는 자포자기의 심정도 아니다. 경험과 편안한 환경 이 두 가지만 있으면 된다라고 하는 부분이 있는데요. 경험과 편안한 환경을 어떻게 만들 수 있을까요? 이 두 가지에 대해서 좀 더 자세히 설명해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
It is good to have somebody who is an expert in helping people die comfortably, but that at least in the United States, death used to be part of life. Small children would see death, people would die in the home and everybody would see it. And it was a part of natural life and family life. And now when a person's dying, they're taken to the hospital or they're taken somewhere else and it's hidden. And when we don't see things, they usually become more scary. They frighten us more because we imagine horrible things. Also, we don't know what to do to help. And when we don't know what to do, that makes us more scared and more unhappy. And there's just some really simple things about how to make a dying person more comfortable. We learn how to care for babies, most of us, but we don't learn how to help at the other end. Yes, you need an expert, but there's also so much that we can each do as a human being to help someone else at their moment of death or in their time of death. So most people want to die at home, but I think it's always good to ask, where does someone want to die? Because maybe your home isn't nice or isn't safe. But for most people, they want to die at home with things that are familiar, with people they love. But good to always ask, where would you like to be? Where will you feel most comfortable and most safe? And then knowing simple things that the body can be uncomfortable. So do you have enough pillows? Can you help the person move? As we get closer to death, it becomes harder to move even our own body. But to have somebody with tenderness help move your body to relieve the pain, you know, if you lie in the same place, even if you sit, I don't know about you, but if you sit on Zoom all day long, you know, it's not so nice. So imagine if you're old and dying. So you move the body. We know that people stop feeling hunger and thirst, but they can feel uncomfortable in their mouth and lips. So you can keep the mouth moist and moisten the lips. And then if they can talk, you ask them, what do you need? What can I get you? How can I help? Really simple things that are so helpful. But usually it's about not being afraid of the dying person or body, asking what they want, moving them, keeping their parts moist and comfortable.
책을 읽고 현대사회의 시민의식과 의학, 그러니까 환원주의적 사고방식에 따른 질병과 치료법 중심의 의학에서 더 좋은 방향으로 개선되어야 된다는 것을 배웠습니다. 그러기 위해서는 나이듦에 대한 인식을 바꾸고 돌봄 의료를 통해서 질병 중심이 아닌 사람 중심의 치료로 스펙트럼을 옮기는 것이 중요하다는 것도 알게 되었습니다. 초고령 사회를 앞두고 노인의 존엄성과 삶의 지지를 위해서 국가와 사회가 어떠한 노력을 해야 될지 궁금합니다.
I think it's sort of what I said before, that we need systems for children and for adults and for old people. So for example, in the COVID pandemic, when our public health systems responded, they had many experts in children and many experts in adults, and they had almost no experts in old people. And so then the old people were dying and they didn't really know what to do. And they didn't really prioritize them. If anybody else had been dying that much, they would have adjusted and made them a priority, but they did not. And so then they died and they said, oh, it's because they're old. But in fact, if they had been given protective equipment, if they had been tested, if people understood the sorts of, sort of where old people live and what the challenges were, we could prevent it, as we did in certain small places. So often we blame old age for a society that is set up only for children and adults, not for old people. And I can give a smaller example of that too, just from last weekend when I was working. We got a phone call from an 89-year-old woman who lived all by herself. So one of her knees got very swollen. And so she couldn't take care of herself. So we had to send her to the emergency room. In the emergency room, they gave her some medicines, which helped a little, but not enough. And also those medicines are dangerous as we get older. But what they did not do was inject her knee with a medicine that makes the problem she has better in a few hours. So they say we don't inject knees because it's not an emergency. But that's true in an adult. You can give them crutches, they go home. But for her, she had to go to a nursing home because they wouldn't inject her knee, but they would give her a medicine that was dangerous for her kidneys. That's because their rules were made for adults, not for 89-year-olds. So she cost the system more money, and she had to go to a place she didn't want to go because of the failing of our rules in the emergency department, not because of what was actually medically wrong with her.
오늘 너무 좋은 시간 감사하고요. 주말에 귀한 아침 시간을 내어주신 모든 분들 80분 정도 참여해 주셨는데요. 정말 감사합니다.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
Thank you.